These next 3 stories are about the Shy Guy, also known as SCP-096. He is a hostile humanoid with very little muscle mass. The Shy Guy is usually extremely docile, except when you view his face. From there, the Shy Guy will be extremely distressed, and he will cover his face with his hands and begin screaming, crying, and babbling. Approximately 1 to 2 minutes after seeing the Shy Guy's face, he will begin to run the person down who viewed its face and completely destroy him. My friend has a really cool cabin in Ontario, Canada that we all went to last weekend. It's about a 30-minute walk from the cabin to the nearest road, and getting a car there is pretty difficult, so walking is the way to go. The cabin is pretty small but easily fits all 5 of us. Anyway, we had been out there for a day and we were all having a really good time. The friend that invited us there mentioned she wanted to show us a really special place that she sometimes walks by. We had been to her cabin before, so we were really kind of shocked she never showed us this amazing place before. We headed out around an hour and a half before sunset, and she assured us that it wasn't far. It wasn't too far technically, but the rough terrain and dense bush made it feel way further than it really was. We finally got to this drop, where there was a huge chunk taken out of the land to make way for the train tracks. It was pretty much us on one cliff with a big drop, then another cliff, roughly 1 road's width of space between the cliffs. I didn't know how to describe it well, but I took some pictures of where the end of the cliffs were. So we were right at the start where there was a bend in the tracks, and we walked along the cliffside until we got to the other end, where the cliff eventually got lower and lower. By the time we reached the end, it was getting pretty dark, and we decided it would be best if we headed back. I really wanted to take some pictures from me standing on the tracks up at the cliffs, but she said we could just come back out tomorrow. So we headed back to where we started. This is where our fun weekend was completely ruined. We were almost back to the trail we followed to get here when we heard this. We looked across the gap at the other side of the tracks and see this young man crying. We just stopped walking and didn't really know what to do. One of my friends shouted to him to ask if he was okay. He made this really unsettling gargling sound, like his mouth or throat was full of something, but it was clear he was trying to say something. He walked real close to the edge and tried to come to us, but we shouted at him to not get too close to the edge. This is when we noticed this weird black looking stuff all over his shirt. It looked like he threw up on his shirt, but it was completely black. That's when we really started freaking out. We asked if he was lost, but he kept making this weird sound. It was so unsettling. It was getting dark fast, and one of my friends started to climb down the cliff to try to help this poor man. Before we can even shift his weight onto the side of the cliff, we see another figure. When I saw this thing appear from out of the bushes, I have never felt my chest get so heavy. This pale-looking, super tall naked man calmly walked out from behind him. The guy must have been like 7 or 8 feet tall, with super skinny long limbs and fingers. It was sickening just looking at him. I could feel his eyes staring at me, but I never looked back. I felt like if I looked him in the eye, he would feel threatened and attack. There was not a single hair on his body. None of us could even move. We just got really quiet. All we could hear was this poor man gargling. The creature just put his hand on the guy's shoulder and led him back, away from us. And just like that, it was completely still. We couldn't see or hear the two. We talked about what we should do, but none of us wanted to go back to the other side of the tracks. We made our way back to the cabin. We all wanted to leave, but it was dark. None of us had any cell service. And like I mentioned before, it was a 30-minute walk to our cars. We all just tried to sleep and left in the morning. My friend told her dad about it and he filed a report, but the local police told him there was nobody in the area missing. I think they sent out a search party, but I have no idea. I don't really know what to do now. I'm a total wreck. The clock struck 5 a.m. I was up all night trying to get to sleep, but my insomnia had me awake. I have always struggled trying to fall asleep, so it's really frustrating just laying in bed for 4 hours. There I was, on my comfortable, warm, and cozy bed. 4 hours later, I finally started to feel tired, and my eyes are feeling heavy. Finally, hopefully I can knock out in a few minutes, I said in my mind. The room was as dark as coal, so the darkness relaxed me a bit. I was told that I moved around a lot in my sleep, and that sometimes I would fall off the bed. Being a full-time college student who worked 2 part-time jobs on the side was really challenging for me, and most likely explains why I was so stressed out at the time. Stress and those negative thoughts that creeped up to me at night was the reason why I fell off the bed. Knowing that before I fell asleep, I told myself I wouldn't fall off the bed this time, and hopefully that it wouldn't happen again. One can only hope that something bad won't ever happen again, but life is unpredictable. I had a conversation with myself in my head, reassuring myself that I wouldn't fall off and get hurt like I usually do. It's like one of those conversations you have with your mind about your body. I felt calm and slowly started to fall asleep as the darkness starts to envelop me. And of course, it happened again, but this time, as my body slowly starts to roll off the bed, I see the closet door crack open. I fall out the bed, and something quickly ran out of the closet and caught me. This thing's skin was gray and dark. I was asleep in the nightmare, but I could feel the texture of its hands. The palm of its hands felt like leather, which was unexpectedly because its whole body looked like it was covered in a fine hair. The creature felt warm. This thing looked like it was 9 feet tall, which would explain why it was crouching so weirdly. There I am, still asleep in its arms. It watched me sleep for a few minutes while it held me. Its eyes were focused on my face. Its eyes were huge and white as pearls. No pupils, just white cloudy eyes. It stood up and its face became contorted. Then I woke up. I am not sure what this creature is and why I'm having these dreams. It was truly terrifying. My name is Dr. John Franklin Miller. I work at the United States Biological Research Facility in Utah. I need to tell you this now, before my life is over. I've locked myself in the security bunker here at the lab. It's got strong titanium doors and locks, so I should be good for another 6 to 12 hours before the power fails. Oh, did I mention the power got knocked out? Yeah. Today started out as any normal work day. I woke up in the barracks, went to work and sat at my desk, read my emails and assignments. One email got my attention straight away. It was from my boss, Mr. Clark. He assigned me to case 4AB. I hated that very case for this reason being, that it was human testing. And yes, we test on humans. Prisoners serving life sentences for crimes. Nobody but the government and the lab knows. The family of the subject are told that he or she died in the prison after a suicide. Anyway, the email from my boss went on to explain the situation. The subject had been given several doses of an experimental drug, known only as Drug X. The purpose of the drug would be to help someone withdraw from sleep for around 6 hours with no physical effects. But things had not worked out that way. The subject had become irritated and quiet. He stopped eating, responding to all communication. He just sits in his room all day, staring at the floor, not moving. Our task was to try and establish communication with the creature, and to try to get it respond again, and maybe even move. So I went on with my duties. Me and 4 other scientists entered the testing area. There was a glass screen that allowed us to look into the room the subject was in. Sure enough, it was a disgusting sight, but we had to record everything we did as soon as we entered. So the scientist pressed play on the tape recorder and said, 8217, subject 4AB. Subject shows very little muscle mass, with preliminary analysis of body mass suggesting mild malnutrition. Arms are grossly out of proportion with the rest of the subject's body, with approximate length of 1.5 meters each. Skin is mostly devoid of pigmentation, with very little signs of body hair. He then activated the subject and asked in a calm voice, "Subject, can you hear me?" No response, so he asked the question again. No response. The subject was facing away from the glass. Nobody could see his face. "Has he died?" asked one of the scientists. "Vital signs read as normal," replied another scientist. One of the scientists pointed at me and said, "You get ready to enter the chamber. You have to check on him." A chill ran down my spine. Me? Why me? But I did as I was told. The door to the chamber flew open. I walked inside and tapped the subject with my boot. It didn't move at all, so I tried to grab the subject, pulling him backwards. He was so stiff and thin. It was horrible. He removed his hands from his face and looked me straight in the eyes. His eyes were white, with singular black pupils in the center. The subject frantically started screaming. He stood up and a mixture of cries and screams flew out of his mouth. I tried to run out of the test chamber, but the door was shut tight. I banged on the door frantically, screaming for the scientist to open it, and he did so. As soon as he did, I flew out. But before I can get all the way out of the room, something shoved into the back of me. It was the subject. I was flung out of the room. The subject had escaped. "Breach!" I screamed, and the scientist raised the alarm. The facility was on lockdown. The subject began to charge at the scientists, killing them brutally. I ran out of the chamber and down the hall. Security teams passed me, and I ran towards the security room, a place where all the staff on duty go if there was a breach. I went inside. Only I knew the truth about Drug X. I locked myself inside the security room. The door deadbolted, and there I am, 3 hours later. Pass this message on. Utah needs to be evacuated. It's not safe. Nobody can stop this thing. The door behind me just broke.
Get back!